You know what they say about peaceful Tuesday mornings in space. They never last. Especially when you're 8 years old, living on a frontier trading post, and your best friend happens to be what the rest of the galaxy calls a dragon. Luna Kowalski was having the kind of morning that would make grown adults weep with envy. She sat cross-legged on the observation deck of her family's space station, watching her pet dragon Pickles attempt to steal a shiny button from her jacket pocket. Now, when I say dragon, don't go imagining some massive fire-breathing terror that could melt starships. Pickles was about the size of a house cat, with iridescent purple scales that shimmered like oil on water, tiny wings that barely got him airborne for more than 3 seconds, and a habit of breathing what could generously be called smoke but looked more like someone had sneezed glitter. Pickles, that's my favorite button. Luna giggled as the little creature wrapped his serpentine tail around the bright red button and attempted to drag it toward his collection corner. His hoard, if you could call it that, consisted entirely of buttons, bottle caps, and one particularly shiny spoon he'd liberated from the galley last week. The peace was shattered by the unmistakable sound of official stupidity approaching. 3 sharp knocks echoed through their modest living quarters, followed by the kind of pompous throat clearing that usually preceded someone demanding to see your manager. Galactic Pet Registration Bureau, announced a voice so stuffed with self-importance it could have been used as insulation. Open immediately for mandatory compliance inspection. Luna's parents, Captain Rex Kowalski and Chief Engineer Zara, exchanged the kind of look that married couples perfect after years of dealing with bureaucratic nonsense. Rex, a former military pilot whose idea of formal wear was a clean jumpsuit, ran a hand through his graying hair. Zara, whose engineering background made her suspicious of anything that couldn't be fixed with a wrench and some creative cursing, was already pulling up legal databases on her tablet. Pet registration, Zara muttered. Since when do we need to register pets? Since never, Rex replied, but he was already moving toward the door. But let's see what they want before we start a diplomatic incident. The door slid open to reveal Commissioner Blunderbottom, a man whose name perfectly matched his personality. He stood barely 5 feet tall but compensated with an elaborate uniform that looked like it had been designed by someone who thought gold braiding was a food group. Behind him lurked Deputy Fumblethorpe, a gangly creature whose species apparently evolved from anxiety itself. Citizens, Blunderbottom announced, consulting a tablet that beeped importantly. We have received reports of an unregistered exotic species on these premises. As per Galactic Regulation 47B12 subsection ridiculous, all exotic pets must be registered, catalogued, and inspected for public safety. Luna clutched Pickles closer to her chest. The little dragon made a soft clicking sound, like someone gently tapping on crystal. Exotic species. Rex's voice carried the kind of calm that made smart people very nervous. That's our daughter's pet. He's harmless. Fumblethorpe pulled out what appeared to be a scientific scanner, though it looked suspiciously like a toy from a cereal box. Scans indicate non-terrestrial DNA markers, elevated energy readings, and, oh my, potential for Class 7 reality disturbance. Class 7 reality disturbance. Zara stepped forward, her engineer's brain already calculating the impossibility of that statement. That's like saying my coffee mug has the potential to become a black hole. Madam, Blunderbottom puffed up like an offended balloon. I'll have you know that the Galactic Pet Registration Bureau takes all potential threats seriously. This creature must be confiscated immediately for proper evaluation and processing. Luna's grip tightened on Pickles, who was now making increasingly agitated clicking sounds. You can't take him. He's my friend. Little girl, Blunderbottom's voice dripped with the kind of condescension usually reserved for explaining why vegetables are good for you. Dangerous creatures often appear friendly. Why, just last week we confiscated a Globmaxian fluff beast that seemed adorable until it tried to consume an entire moon. Pickles wouldn't hurt anybody, Luna insisted, but her voice was starting to waver. He can barely fly, and his fire is just sparkles. The clicking sound grew louder, and if anyone had been paying attention to the station's sensor readings, they might have noticed some very interesting energy fluctuations beginning to register on the quantum spectrum. But Commissioner Blunderbottom was too busy being important, and Deputy Fumblethorpe was too busy trying not to trip over his own feet. Nevertheless, Blunderbottom declared, producing what looked like a high-tech pet carrier, regulations are regulations. The creature will be properly housed at our facility pending evaluation. If it proves harmless, you may apply for its return through proper channels. The waiting period is only 18 to 24 months. Rex's military training kicked in, reading the room like a tactical situation. Something about these two didn't add up. Real government inspectors didn't show up unannounced on remote trading posts, and they certainly didn't travel with equipment that looked like it came from a black market dealer. And if we refuse to comply? He asked quietly. Blunderbottom's smile could have frozen helium. Then we'll be forced to classify this station as harboring illegal exotic species. That's a class of violation, punishable by immediate evacuation and station impoundment. Luna looked up at her parents, tears beginning to form in her eyes. Pickles had gone very still in her arms, and the clicking had stopped entirely. The sudden silence was somehow more ominous than the agitated sounds had been. "It's going to be okay, sweetheart," Zara said softly, but her voice carried the weight of a parent who wasn't entirely sure that was true. The first tear rolled down Luna's cheek just as Deputy Fumblethorpe stepped forward with the carrier, his hands reaching for the little dragon who had never hurt anyone, never done anything more threatening than steal buttons and occasionally get glitter on the furniture. And that's when the station's quantum sensors started screaming. The quantum sensors weren't just screaming, they were having a full-blown panic attack. The kind of readings that usually preceded either a wormhole collapse or someone accidentally tearing a hole in the fabric of space-time. You know, Tuesday morning stuff. "What is that racket?" Blunderbottom demanded, wincing as the alarm klaxons joined the symphony of impending doom. "Oh, that's just our early warning system," Zara said with the kind of calm that engineers use when they're about to watch something spectacularly stupid happen. "It goes off when it detects massive energy buildups. Usually right before something explodes." Deputy Fumblethorpe looked like he was about to wet himself, which would have been impressive considering his species didn't technically have bladders. "Commissioner, perhaps we should reconsider." "Nonsense," Blunderbottom cut him off. "A little pet can't possibly be causing those readings. Probably just faulty equipment on this backwater station." He gestured impatiently at the carrier. "Fumblethorpe, proceed with the confiscation." The deputy approached Luna with all the confidence of a man walking into a den of hungry bears while wearing a bacon suit. His confiscation equipment looked like it had been ordered from the same catalog as children's birthday party supplies. A net that sparkled with what might have been containment field technology, or might have been craft store glitter. A pair of grabber arms that looked suspiciously like oversized salad tongs, and what appeared to be a spray bottle labeled Universal Pet Sedative in fonts that suggested it was probably just water with a fancy label. "Now, little girl," Fumblethorpe said in a voice that managed to sound both condescending and terrified, "if you'll just hand over the creature." "His name is Pickles," Luna said fiercely, her tears flowing more freely now. "And he's not a creature. He's my friend." Pickles, meanwhile, had gone from perfectly still to vibrating at a frequency that was making the air around him shimmer. The clicking sounds had returned, but now they sounded less like gentle tapping and more like the universe's most dangerous metronome counting down to something very, very bad. "The energy readings are spiking," Rex announced, watching his sensor displays with the kind of fascination usually reserved for watching natural disasters from a safe distance. "Whatever's happening, it's centered on the dragon," Zara finished, her engineer's brain finally putting together pieces that should have been obvious from the start. "Oh, you magnificent idiots. You have no idea what you're dealing with, do you?" Blunderbottom puffed up with indignation. "I'll have you know that I am a certified expert in exotic species identification. I've handled everything from Andromedan fluffworms to Centaurian singing crystals. One small dragon is hardly." That's when Fumblethorpe made his move. With the kind of misplaced confidence that would have made insurance companies everywhere weep, he lunged forward with his glittery net and salad tong grabbers. Luna screamed, not a little girl's scared cry, but the kind of sound that carries the weight of genuine heartbreak. The sound of someone watching their best friend being taken away by people who didn't understand, didn't care, and couldn't be reasoned with. Pickles stopped vibrating. For exactly 1 second, the entire universe held its breath. Then he started glowing. Not the gentle pretty glow of a nightlight or a romantic candle. This was the kind of glow that suggested something fundamental about reality was about to change its mind. Purple light began radiating from his scales, starting as a soft luminescence and rapidly building to something that made everyone in the room start seeing spots. "Successfully captured," Fumblethorpe announced triumphantly, apparently immune to the blinding light show happening 3 feet from his face. He managed to get the glowing dragon into the carrier, and slam it shut. "Containment field is holding. Commissioner, we can proceed with transportation." The carrier, designed to hold normal pets doing normal pet things, began making sounds like it was being attacked by a very small but extremely determined demolition crew. "Excellent work, Deputy," Blunderbottom said, though his voice had taken on the slightly hysterical edge of someone trying very hard to ignore obvious danger signs. "Now as for the processing fee. Rex's voice had gone dangerously quiet. "Oh yes," Blunderbottom smiled with the kind of greed that would make loan sharks blush. "Confiscation, transportation, evaluation, housing, and processing. Comes to about 15,000 credits." plus a small convenience fee for same-day service. Luna collapsed to her knees, sobbing as she watched her best friend trapped in a cage that was now glowing like a tiny purple sun, and making sounds like someone was running a chainsaw through a violin factory. That's when the lights went out. Not just the lights in their quarters. Every light on the station, every screen, every display, every indicator that suggested civilization and technology, and the comfortable illusion that humans understood how the universe worked. In the sudden darkness, Pickles' glow became the only source of illumination, and for the first time, Commissioner Blunderbottom's expression showed something other than smug confidence. It showed the dawning realization that maybe, just maybe, he had made a terrible mistake. The carrier cracked, just a small fracture at first, but growing with each pulse of purple light. Commissioner Fumblethorpe's voice had climbed about 3 octaves. I think we should leave now. But it was already too late. The containment field flickered, sparked, and died with the kind of electronic whimper that suggested it had tried its best, but was dealing with forces well beyond its pay grade. Pickles pushed his way out of the broken carrier, no longer the size of a house cat. He was now roughly the size of a golden retriever, still growing, and his eyes had become twin stars that seemed to see straight through to the core of everything they looked at. Luna stopped crying, and started smiling through her tears. I told you his name was Pickles, she said softly, and I told you he was my friend. The quantum sensors had gone beyond screaming into what could only be described as electronic hysteria. You know what's funny about the universe? It has a twisted sense of humor. Just when you think you understand the rules, reality decides to take a coffee break and let chaos drive for a while. And chaos, as it turns out, has a thing for dramatic timing. Pickles continued growing, his scales now crackling with energy that made the air taste like ozone and possibility. The purple glow had intensified to the point where everyone's shadows were dancing on the walls like they were auditioning for a horror movie. This is impossible, Blunderbottom stammered, his earlier confidence evaporating faster than water on a sun's surface. The scans showed a Class 2 domestic companion at most. This is clearly some sort of equipment malfunction. Commissioner, Fumblethorpe whispered, his voice shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. I don't think our equipment is malfunctioning. I think we are. Rex had gone very still. The kind of still that comes from years of military training and the sudden recognition of something that should have stayed buried in classified files. His face had gone pale, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old nightmares. Zara, he said quietly, get Luna behind the blast shield. Now. Rex, what's wrong? But Zara was already moving, her engineer's instincts telling her that when her husband used that tone, questions came after survival. I know what he is, Rex said, never taking his eyes off Pickles, who was now the size of a small horse and showing no signs of stopping. I've seen energy signatures like this before. During the war, Grid Sector 7. When the hegemony tried to invade the Outer Rim colonies. Pickles turned his star-bright eyes toward Rex and made a sound that was part purr, part cosmic harmony. It was the kind of sound that made you understand, on a cellular level, that you were in the presence of something that existed before galaxies learned how to spin. He's a void drake, Rex whispered. The silence that followed was the kind that comes right before someone drops a really big bomb into a really small pond. A what now? Zara's voice had the carefully controlled tone of someone trying very hard not to panic. Void drakes are mythical, Blunderbottom protested, though his protest sounded about as convincing as a chocolate teapot. They're legends. Stories made up by primitive cultures to explain natural phenomena they couldn't understand. Rex let out a laugh that had absolutely no humor in it. Mythical. Right. Tell that to the hegemony battle fleet that got turned into origami by a bonded pair during the siege of Kepler Station. Pickles had stopped growing, settling at roughly the size of a pony, but the energy radiating from him suggested that size was more of a personal choice than a physical limitation. His scales had taken on an almost liquid quality, shifting between purple and deep space black with stars twinkling in their depths like windows into infinity. They bond with humans, Rex continued, his voice taking on the cadence of someone reciting from a military briefing he'd hoped never to remember. Usually children. The bond is psychic, emotional, and apparently strong enough to let them disguise themselves as ordinary pets. They're guardians, protectors, and when their bonded human is threatened. Luna stepped out from behind her mother, no longer crying, her small hand reaching toward Pickles. When her fingers touched his snout, the air itself seemed to sing. They reveal their true nature, she finished, her voice carrying an odd echo, as if she was speaking in harmony with something vast and ancient. Pickles has been taking care of me since I was little, haven't you, boy? The dragon nuzzled her hand, and when he spoke, his voice resonated through their minds rather than their ears. It was warm, amused, and carried the kind of patience that comes from watching stars be born. Indeed, little one. Though I must admit, this is the first time anyone has tried to arrest me with salad tongs. Fumblethorpe made a sound that was somewhere between a whimper and a dying balloon. This is preposterous, Blunderbottom sputtered, though his bluster was beginning to sound more desperate than confident. Even if this creature is what you claim, it's still an unregistered exotic species. The law is the law. Actually, Zara said, her tablet beeping as she pulled up legal databases with the kind of speed that came from years of dealing with bureaucratic stupidity. According to Galactic Treaty 445C, ratified after the Void Drake Accords, any bonded Void Drake is considered a sentient citizen with full rights and protections. Attempting to confiscate one is equivalent to kidnapping. Furthermore, Rex added, his military bearing returning as he stepped protectively closer to his daughter and her guardian. The Void Drake Accords specifically state that any attempt to separate a bonded pair through deception or coercion is considered an act of war against the Void Drake Collective. Pickles tilted his magnificent head, starlight dancing in his eyes. War is such an ugly word. I prefer to think of it as aggressive negotiations. The quantum sensors, which had been screaming in electronic terror, suddenly went quiet. Not the quiet of systems returning to normal, but the quiet of instruments that had given up trying to measure something that existed beyond their comprehension. Commissioner Blunderbottom looked around the room, taking in the enormous dragon, the glowing scales, the parents who were no longer intimidated by his authority, and the little girl who was casually petting a creature that could probably rearrange solar systems if it got bored. There seems to have been a misunderstanding, he said weakly. Oh, there's been a misunderstanding, all right, Luna said, and her smile was pure 8-year-old mischief backed by the power of something that remembered when the universe was young. But it's not the kind you think. Pickles began to purr, a sound like distant thunder mixed with cosmic laughter. Would you like to know the real reason we came here, little Luna? He asked, his mental voice carrying amusement and something darker. These gentlemen aren't really from the Pet Registration Bureau at all. The wonderful thing about cosmic justice is that it comes with a sense of humor. And Pickles, as it turned out, had been around long enough to develop a truly spectacular appreciation for irony. Not really from the Pet Registration Bureau? Luna asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Pickles, what do you mean? The Void Drake's mental voice carried the warm satisfaction of someone about to reveal the punchline to a very long, very elaborate joke. Commissioner Blunderbottom here is wanted in 17 star systems for exotic creature trafficking. Deputy Fumblethorpe holds the galactic record for botched kidnapping attempts. They've been using fake government credentials to steal bonded companions and sell them to private collectors. Blunderbottom's face went through several interesting color changes, settling on a shade of pale green that complemented his ridiculous uniform nicely. That's completely unfounded. We have official documentation, you have forgeries, Pickles interrupted. And suddenly the air around the two criminals began to shimmer. Shall I demonstrate what happens when someone tries to steal a Void Drake? Now see here, Fumblethorpe squeaked, pulling out what looked like a military-grade stun weapon. We don't want any trouble. Just hand over the creature and we'll be on our way. Luna giggled. Actually giggled. Pickles, they're still calling you a creature. How delightfully rude, Pickles replied, and his amusement rippled through the air like visible laughter. I haven't been insulted by criminals in at least 3 centuries. This is nostalgic. What happened next could only be described as reality having a bit of fun at the expense of people who really deserved it. Pickles didn't roar or breathe fire or do any of the dramatic things you might expect from a revealed dragon. Instead, he simply looked at Commissioner Blunderbottom with those star-filled eyes and suggested that the universe might be more interesting if certain adjustments were made. The first thing to go was Blunderbottom's uniform. Not dramatically, not violently, just elsewhere. One moment he was wearing his elaborate golden braided jacket, and the next moment he was standing in his underwear. Bright pink underwear, with little hearts on it, and the words Mommy's Special Boy embroidered across the back. My uniform. Blunderbottom shrieked, trying to cover himself with his hands. Where did you send my uniform? Oh, various places, Pickles said conversationally. Your jacket is currently being used as a tablecloth by a very nice family of methane farmers on Titan. Your pants are keeping a small penguin-like creature warm on an ice planet in the Andromeda Galaxy. Your boots are being worn by a statue in a museum dedicated to footwear throughout history. The statue is quite pleased with them. Fumblethorpe raised his stun weapon, hands shaking so badly he was mostly pointing it at the ceiling. "Stay back, I'm warning you." Pickles turned his attention to the deputy, and his mental voice took on the tone of someone explaining something very simple to someone very slow. "You're going to shoot me with that adorable little toy. It's military grade." Fumblethorpe protested. "Class 7 neural disruptor. How fascinating," Pickles mused. "Let me show you something even more interesting." Fumblethorpe pulled the trigger. The stun weapon fired with impressive electrical pyrotechnics, the kind that would have dropped a charging rhino or a moderately angry bureaucrat. The energy beam hit Pickles and bounced. Not just bounced but bounced with style, ricocheting around the room like a very energetic ping-pong ball before somehow finding its way back to Fumblethorpe, who promptly stunned himself into unconsciousness. "Oops," said Pickles, though his tone suggested the oops was about as sincere as a politician's campaign promise. Luna was now openly laughing, the kind of delighted laughter that comes from watching bullies get their comeuppance in the most ridiculous way possible. But Pickles wasn't done. While Fumblethorpe was taking his involuntary nap, something very interesting began happening to the unconscious deputy. He started moving, not waking up and moving, but moving while still completely unconscious, like he was sleepwalking through some invisible obstacle course. "What's happening to him?" Zara asked, though her tone suggested she was enjoying the show. "Temporal loop," Pickles explained cheerfully. "He's experiencing the same 30 seconds over and over again. Specifically, the 30 seconds where he walks into that door, falls down, gets up, and walks into the door again. It's quite entertaining from my perspective." And indeed, Fumblethorpe was now trapped in an endless cycle of door walking and falling, his unconscious body performing the same slapstick routine with the dedication of a method actor. "This is assault," Blunderbottom howled, still trying to maintain some dignity while wearing heart-covered underwear. "This is illegal imprisonment." "This is hilarious," Luna said firmly. "Pickles, what about their spaceship?" "Ah yes, their ship," Pickles said, and his mental voice carried the satisfaction of someone saving the best for last. "The vessel they use to travel between star systems, stealing bonded companions from families just like yours. Would you like to know what I did with it?" Rex and Zara exchanged glances. "Do we want to know?" Rex asked. "I turned it into art," Pickles announced proudly. "Specifically, I transformed it into a giant sculpture of a rubber duck. It's currently floating in the asteroid belt, broadcasting a message that says I tried to steal someone's best friend and all I got was turned into bath toy. The message repeats in 4,847 different galactic languages." "You turned their spaceship into a rubber duck?" Luna asked, clapping her hands together with delight. "A very large rubber duck," Pickles confirmed. "With a bow tie. I thought the bow tie was a nice touch." Commissioner Blunderbottom sank to his knees, the reality of his situation finally penetrating his skull. "You can't do this. There are laws, there are regulations, there are proper procedures for kidnapping." Rex interrupted, his military bearing making him suddenly seem much larger and more dangerous. "For trafficking sentient beings. For terrorizing children. Please tell me more about these proper procedures." "The Galactic Pet Registration Bureau isn't even a real organization," Zara added, waving her tablet. "I've been checking the databases. There's no such agency, no such regulations, and no legal authority for what you tried to do here." Blunderbottom looked around desperately, taking in the dragon whose eyes held the light of ancient stars, the family who was no longer intimidated by his fake authority, and his deputy who was still performing his unconscious door-walking routine with mechanical precision. "Perhaps," he said weakly, "we could discuss a settlement." Luna looked at Pickles, her connection with the ancient creature allowing her to sense the vast amusement radiating from his mind. "What do you think, Pickles? Should we let them go?" "Oh little one," Pickles replied, his mental voice warm with affection and cold with justice. "I think we should let the proper authorities handle them. The real authorities. The ones who've been looking for these two for quite some time." As if summoned by his words, the communication array crackled to life, and a stern voice filled the room. "This is Captain Morrison of the Galactic Security Force. We've been tracking the criminals known as Blunderbottom and Fumblethorpe. Please respond if you require assistance." Rex keyed the communicator with a grin. "This is Captain Kowalski. We have your suspects in custody. Fair warning though, one of them is stuck in a temporal loop, and the other one is having a bad underwear day." "Copy that, Captain Kowalski. We're familiar with the unusual circumstances. We'll be there shortly." Luna looked up at Pickles, who had settled back into a more comfortable position, his cosmic light dimming to a warm, friendly glow. "Are you going to change back now?" "If you'd like me to," Pickles replied. "Though I must admit, after centuries of pretending to be interested in buttons and bottle caps, it's rather refreshing to stretch my metaphysical wings." "I like you both ways," Luna said seriously. "But I think the button-collecting version of you is easier to hug." And with that simple statement from an 8-year-old girl, one of the most powerful beings in the known universe began to shrink back down to housecat size. His cosmic radiance, fading to the gentle shimmer of an ordinary pet dragon, who just happened to be extraordinarily good at keeping his best friend safe. Fumblethorpe was still walking into the door. "The beautiful thing about truth is that it has a way of unraveling everything you thought you knew, then rebuilding it into something that makes so much more sense you wonder how you missed it in the first place." And as Pickles settled back into his adorable button-stealing persona, the real story began to emerge like a photograph developing in reverse. "Rex," Zara said quietly, watching her husband's expression as he looked at their daughter and her not-so-ordinary pet, "you knew, didn't you? You've known all along what Pickles really was." Rex ran a hand through his hair, the gesture of a man who'd been carrying a secret for far too long, not from the beginning. When Luna first found him, he was just, well, he looked like what he wanted to look like. A lost baby dragon, small enough to fit in her backpack, scared and alone. But after a few months, when the nightmares started getting better— "What nightmares?" Luna asked, settling cross-legged on the floor as Pickles climbed into her lap, once again small enough to be cuddled. "The war dreams, sweetheart. From my time in the service." Rex's voice carried the weight of old battles and older guilt. "I'd been having them for years before you were born. Combat flashbacks, mostly, but after Pickles showed up, they just stopped. That's when I started wondering if our little friend here was more than he seemed." Pickles looked up from his comfortable position in Luna's arms, his eyes still holding just a hint of starlight. "The Void Drake War wasn't really a war, you know. It was more of a diplomatic misunderstanding that got out of hand." "Diplomatic misunderstanding?" Zara raised an eyebrow. "Rex told me entire fleets were destroyed." "Well, yes," Pickles admitted, sounding almost sheepish. "But in our defense, the hegemony did try to enslave several of our bonded humans. We may have overreacted slightly. Turning their entire invasion force into origami seemed like a proportionate response at the time." "Origami?" Luna giggled. "You turned spaceships into paper cranes." "Paper cranes, paper flowers. One particularly artistic dreadnought became a 12-foot-tall paper swan. The hegemony admiral's flagship was transformed into a pop-up book that told the story of why you shouldn't mess with people we care about." Pickles' mental voice carried fond memories. "Very educational. I'm told it still required reading at their military academy." Rex sat down heavily in his chair, pieces of a puzzle he'd been working on for years finally clicking into place. "The energy signatures I tracked during the war. They weren't weapons readings, were they? They were emotional resonance patterns. You were responding to the fear and pain of your bonded humans. Humans have such powerful emotions," Pickles explained, his voice growing serious. "Fear, love, joy, anger. They broadcast on frequencies that resonate across dimensional barriers. When a human we're bonded to is threatened, we feel it like a physical blow. The war happened because the hegemony couldn't understand that what they saw as conquest, we experienced as torture." "But that's not the whole story, is it?" Zara asked, her engineer's mind already 3 steps ahead. Blunderbottom and Fumblethorpe weren't just random criminals. They were targeting bonded pairs specifically. Pickles' purr took on a darker undertone. "Very perceptive. They've been at this for almost a decade, using fake government credentials to steal companions from families across the galaxy. They sell the bonded pairs to collectors who want to own something rare and powerful." "Collectors?" Luna's voice was small and hurt. "People who would buy friends. People who don't understand that friendship can't be bought or sold," Rex said gently. "People who think power and rarity are more important than love and trust. The worst part," Pickles continued, his mental voice heavy with ancient sadness, "is that separation from a bonded human is traumatic for us. We can survive it, but the experience leaves us diminished. Less than we were. The criminals have been deliberately breaking bonds to make us easier to handle." Zara's tablet chimed with an incoming message. "It's from the Galactic Security Force. Captain Morrison says they've been tracking this trafficking ring for months. Apparently Blunderbottom and Fumblethorpe are just the tip of the iceberg." "How big is this operation?" Rex asked, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer wouldn't be pleasant. 17 star systems, 43 documented cases of bonded pair theft, and an estimated black market value of over 2 billion credits, Zara read from her screen. They've been using the fake Pet Registration Bureau identity to target families in remote locations where local authorities can't respond quickly. Luna looked down at Pickles, her young mind processing the implications with the clarity that children sometimes possess. They were going to sell you to someone who would keep you in a cage. Probably, Pickles agreed. Though I suspect they would have discovered that caging a void drake is somewhat more difficult than their equipment specifications suggested. But why didn't you just stop them right away? Luna asked. You could have turned them into rubber ducks the moment they walked in. Pickles was quiet for a moment, his mental voice thoughtful. Because you needed to see what you were capable of, little one. The bond between a human and a void drake isn't just one-sided. You've been unconsciously helping me maintain my disguise for years. Your belief in me as just Pickles made it easier for me to be just Pickles. You mean I was doing magic? Luna's eyes widened with wonder. Not magic. Something better. Something that comes from the heart, instead of from formulas and equations. Pickles nuzzled her hand. You were doing what humans do best. You were believing in something impossible and making it real through the sheer force of your caring. Rex leaned forward, his military training kicking in. The trafficking ring. They must have known what you were. That's why they came here specifically. They had intelligence, Pickles confirmed. Someone has been providing them with information about bonded pairs. Someone with access to old military records. Someone who knows how to identify the energy signatures we leave behind. An inside job, Zara muttered. Someone with clearance high enough to access classified Void Drake war documents. Luna suddenly straightened, her connection with Pickles allowing her to sense something the adults had missed. Pickles, there's something else, isn't there? Something you haven't told us yet. The small dragon's eyes grew distant, as if he was seeing across vast distances or through time itself. The trafficking ring isn't just about money, little one. It's about control. Someone is collecting bonded pairs for a specific purpose. They're trying to build something. Something that would require the combined power of multiple void drakes. Build what? Rex asked, though his voice suggested he was afraid of the answer. A weapon, Pickles said simply. A weapon that could reshape reality on a galactic scale. The kind of weapon that could make the hegemony war look like a minor disagreement. The room fell silent as the implications settled over them like a cold blanket. Luna, still just 8 years old, looked around at the adults' worried faces and made a decision with the kind of certainty that only children possess. Then we have to stop them, she said simply. All of them. Pickles' purr resumed, but now it carried notes of pride and determination. I was hoping you'd say that, little one. Because I have a plan. But it's going to require something very dangerous. What's that? Luna asked, though her tone suggested she was ready for anything. It's going to require trusting other humans. Lots of them. Humans we've never met. Humans who might be scared of us. Humans who might not understand what we're trying to do. Pickles' mental voice grew serious. Are you ready for that kind of adventure? Luna looked at her parents, who nodded encouragingly, despite their obvious concerns. She looked at Fumblethorpe, who was still walking into the door with mechanical precision. She looked at Blunderbottom, who was trying to fashion a toga out of a maintenance tarp. Then she looked back at Pickles, her best friend, her guardian, her partner in the kind of cosmic adventure that most people only dreamed about. I'm ready, she said. But first, can we do something about the door walking thing? It's getting kind of sad. Pickles chuckled, a sound like distant thunder mixed with wind chimes. Of course, but I think we'll let him finish his current loop. He's almost at the part where he trips over his own feet. And sure enough, Fumblethorpe promptly tripped over his own feet, fell down, got up and walked into the door again. Okay, Luna said, trying not to giggle. Now I'm ready to save the galaxy. Here's the thing about 8-year-olds. They haven't learned yet that some problems are supposed to be too big for them to solve. They haven't been taught that bureaucracy is stronger than determination, or that adults always know better, or that the universe operates according to rules that can't be bent by sheer stubborn refusal to accept defeat. Luna Kowalski was about to give the galaxy a masterclass in why underestimating human children is a mistake of cosmic proportions. Pickles, she said, settling into the kind of determined posture that had once convinced her parents to let her adopt a stray dragon in the first place. I need you to connect me to every bonded pair in the galaxy. The small dragon's eyes widened, stars twinkling in their depths. Luna, that's never been done before. The psychic resonance alone could be overwhelming. Hundreds of minds, all connected at once. But you can do it, right? Luna asked with the confidence of someone who had never doubted her best friend's abilities. Theoretically, yes, but the strain on your mind will be worth it if we can save everyone else. Luna finished firmly. Besides, I've been practicing. Practicing what? Zara asked, though her tone suggested she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Luna grinned, the kind of mischievous expression that had always meant trouble. Remember when I kept guessing what you were thinking about dinner, or when I always knew when Dad was coming home before his ship even entered sensor range, or when I could find lost things by just knowing where they were? Rex and Zara exchanged glances. We thought you were just intuitive, Rex said slowly. I was. But Pickles was teaching me. Weren't you, Pickles? The dragon's mental voice carried a mixture of pride and fond exasperation. She's been unconsciously developing her psychic abilities for years. The bond between us has been growing stronger, more complex. She's not just my bonded human anymore. She's becoming something new, something unprecedented. What do you mean? Zara asked, her engineer's mind already racing through the implications. She's becoming a bridge, Pickles explained. A connection point between human consciousness and Void Drake awareness. If she can handle the psychic load, she could theoretically network every bonded pair in the galaxy into a single communication system. Luna nodded as if this was the most natural thing in the world. Like a really big phone call, but with thoughts instead of voices. A really big phone call that could fundamentally alter the structure of galactic civilization, Rex pointed out. Luna, sweetheart, are you sure about this? Dad, Luna said with the patience of someone explaining something obvious to someone slow. Bad people are stealing families apart. They're hurting people like Pickles, and they're planning to build a weapon that could hurt everyone. Someone has to stop them. The Galactic Security Force, Zara began. Can't find all the victims, can't track down the inside source, and definitely can't move fast enough to stop whatever weapon they're building. Luna interrupted. But we can. If every bonded pair knows what's happening, if they all work together, we can find the bad guys, and stop them before they hurt anyone else. Captain Morrison's voice crackled over the communication array. Captain Kowalski, we're preparing to board. Is the situation secure? Rex keyed the communicator. Captain Morrison, before you board, there's something you need to know. We're about to attempt a galaxy-wide psychic network connection. It might be noticeable on your sensors. There was a long pause. A what now? My daughter is about to become the most powerful communications hub in galactic history. Rex explained with the kind of casual tone that suggested this was just another Tuesday in the Kowalski family. Copy that, Morrison replied, though his voice suggested he was mentally updating his incident report with increasingly bizarre details. We'll monitor the situation from a safe distance. Luna settled more comfortably on the floor. Pickles curled in her lap like a perfectly ordinary pet who just happened to contain enough power to reshape reality. Are you ready, Pickles? As ready as one can be for something that's never been attempted before. Pickles replied. Remember, if it becomes too much, just let go. I can handle the backlash. I won't let go, Luna said with the absolute certainty that only comes from being 8 years old and completely convinced you're right. We're partners. We do this together. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and reached out with her mind. The first connection was easy. A little girl on Proxima Station whose bonded Drake had been hiding as a peculiar-looking hamster. The second was a teenage boy, whose companion had been masquerading as an unusually intelligent houseplant. The third was an elderly woman, whose dragon had spent 40 years pretending to be a particularly opinionated parrot. By the 10th connection, Luna was smiling. By the 50th, she was laughing with delight. By the 100th, she had stopped being just Luna Kowalski, and had become something larger, something that encompassed the experiences and perspectives of humans and void drakes across the galaxy. I can see them, she said, her voice carrying harmonics that hadn't been there before. I can see all of them. The traffickers, the inside source, the weapon they're building. It's not what we thought. What do you mean? Rex asked, though he was watching sensor readouts that suggested his daughter was now broadcasting on frequencies that didn't technically exist. The weapon isn't meant to destroy things, Luna explained, her consciousness now spanning star systems. It's meant to control them. To take over every bonded pair in the galaxy, and use them as puppets. Someone wants to control every void drake, which means they want to control reality itself. Through the network, she could sense the shock and anger rippling through hundreds of bonded pairs. Humans and dragons, who had been living quiet, peaceful lives suddenly realizing they were all targets in someone else's game of cosmic chess. But here's the thing, Luna continued, and now her voice carried the combined determination of every human who had ever refused to give up, and every void drake who had ever chosen to protect someone they loved. They made one really big mistake. What's that? Zara asked, though she was watching her daughter with a mixture of pride and terror. They assumed we'd be afraid, Luna said. And across the galaxy, Bonded pairs began to move with coordinated purpose. They assumed we'd hide. They assumed that if they stole enough of us, the rest would be too scared to fight back. On 17 different worlds, galactic security forces found themselves guided by impossibly accurate intelligence to the exact locations of trafficking operations. Hidden facilities were exposed. Corrupt officials found their private communications broadcasted across public networks, and criminal organizations discovered that their secure hideouts had somehow become as visible as landmarks. But we're not afraid, Luna continued, her network growing stronger with every connection. We're angry, and when humans get angry about someone hurting their friends, we don't hide, we don't run, we don't give up. The inside source, a corrupt galactic security admiral, who had been selling bonded pair locations for years, found himself surrounded by his own security forces, all of whom had just received ironclad evidence of his crimes delivered simultaneously to their personal communicators. We get stubborn, Luna said, and her smile was now being shared by hundreds of bonded humans across the galaxy. Really stubborn. The weapon facility, hidden in an asteroid field in the outer rim, suddenly found itself surrounded by the largest coordinated fleet action in galactic history. Not a military fleet, but a civilian one. Cargo ships, passenger liners, private yachts, and mining vessels, all carrying bonded pairs who had decided that enough was enough. And when humans get stubborn about protecting the people they love, Luna concluded, the universe tends to rearrange itself around us. Commissioner Blunderbottom, still trying to maintain dignity while wearing a maintenance tarp as a toga, looked around the room with dawning horror. This is impossible. One child can't organize a galactic revolution. Luna opened her eyes, and for a moment, they held the same starlight as Pickles. You're right, she said cheerfully. One child can't, but one child with a few hundred friends and their dragons. That's a different story entirely. Pickles purred with satisfaction. I told you humans were special, little one. You've just proven it to the entire galaxy. The communication array crackled with reports from across known space. Trafficking rings dismantled. Corrupt officials arrested. Stolen companions reunited with their families. The weapon facility surrendered without firing a shot, its personnel apparently too stunned by the coordinated response to mount any resistance. Captain Morrison, to Captain Kowalski, came the voice over the comm. I'm not sure what just happened, but every outstanding case on our books just got solved simultaneously. The paperwork alone is going to take years. Luna giggled, the sound perfectly normal and 8-year-old again. Sorry about that, we kind of got carried away. Don't apologize, Morrison replied. In one day, you've accomplished what we've been trying to do for months. The entire trafficking network is gone. How did you do it? Luna looked at Pickles, who was now the size of a house cat again but still had stars in his eyes. We just asked our friends for help. It turns out, when you ask nicely and explain why it's important, people are usually willing to help out, even if it means reorganizing galactic civilization. Rex asked, though his tone was more admiring than concerned. Especially then, Luna said firmly. Someone was hurting families. Someone was breaking apart friends. Someone thought they could use fear to control people who were just trying to live their lives peacefully. She scratched behind Pickles' ears, and he leaned into her touch with contentment. But they forgot something important about humans. We don't stay scared very long. And we really don't like bullies. Fumblethorpe had finally stopped walking into the door and was now sitting on the floor, looking dazed and confused. Blunderbottom was trying to negotiate with the maintenance tarp that had apparently decided to rearrange itself into a more embarrassing configuration. So what happens now? Zara asked. Luna considered this with the seriousness that 8-year-olds bring to truly important questions. Well, first we have lunch. Saving the galaxy makes me hungry. Then I think Pickles and I should write a book about our adventure. And maybe we should start a club. What kind of club? Rex asked, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer would be interesting. The kind where kids with dragon friends can talk to each other and share stories, and make sure no one ever tries to steal anybody's best friend ever again. Luna said as if this was the most obvious thing in the world. Pickles' mental voice carried warm laughter. A support group for bonded pairs. I like it. We could call it the Dragon Friends Club. That's a terrible name, Luna said fondly. We'll call it something better, like the Cosmic Friendship Society, or the Galaxy Guardians Club, or the Button Collectors Anonymous, Pickles suggested, eyeing his hoard in the corner. Luna burst into giggles. That's perfect. The Button Collectors Anonymous. Because everyone will think it's about collecting buttons, but really it's about collecting friends. And so on a Tuesday afternoon in space, an 8-year-old girl and her dragon accidentally started a movement that would reshape galactic civilization, all because they refused to let someone take their friendship away from them. The universe, as it turned out, was perfectly fine with this arrangement. After all, the universe had always had a soft spot for stubborn humans and the creatures who chose to love them.